In this video, we're going to talk about trauma bond symptoms. By the end, you're going to understand what a trauma bond is, how it's formed through insecure attachment. You're going to understand some of the symptoms of a trauma bond, and we're going to talk about maybe one of the most important steps to begin reducing your trauma bond. Hi, if you're new to this channel, my name's Tom Philp. I'm a trauma-informed coach, and I've been working with couples and individuals for decades who struggle with relational or attachment trauma to regain trust in themselves and others so that they can experience a safe and secure relationship. Okay, let's dig in. What is a trauma bond? A trauma bond is simply an attachment relationship. Yes, if you're in a trauma bond, it means you are attached to your partner, but it's really an insecure style of attachment. But what makes the trauma bond so dangerous is that there is an intermittent between reinforcement of the good things and reinforcement of the bad things in the relationship. But here's the key, and perhaps what's most important, is even though there may be some good moments, some good times, they don't outweigh the bad moments. They don't outweigh the harm that is done to one or both partners in that relationship. And the good times, they actually act as a hook to keep one or both partners addicted to that particular relationship. And I use that term specifically because when you're in a trauma bonded relationship, it is much like an addiction where your nervous system has learned to adjust to these high highs and these low lows. And so it almost craves this roller coaster ride, this back and forth between, oh my gosh, when we're up, when things are good, things are incredibly good, it's so intense, we're so in love, it's so awesome. But then these lows just send you reeling, and these lows take you to a whole nother place where it feels harmful in the relationship. And that could certainly be physical, emotional, or psychological harm. And so a trauma bond is simply a bond with another person that swings between high highs and low lows, and there's usually a hook so that it feels like it's very difficult to extract yourself from the relationship. It feels very difficult to be able to set boundaries, and you almost learn to crave that relationship. It almost becomes and takes on these addictive type qualities. A trauma bond is primarily formed, as I mentioned, through this inconsistent availability of a partner, inconsistent attachment. It certainly falls into the insecure attachment style, but inconsistent attachment means that they're there for you one moment, but then they're not in another. And your body cannot learn how to predict when they will be there for you. And so your body begins to adjust. It becomes very focused and attuned on the individual that you're in a relationship with, looking for that moment when they might be able to show up for you. They might be listening to you, understanding you. They might show care, love, or concern in that moment, and when that moment might shift. And so a lot of times your nervous system becomes very hypervigilant to your partner because what you're looking for is almost that look in their eye, that dilation of the pupil that says, uh-oh, here we go. And so your nervous system becomes very alert and almost on danger all the time and on alert all the time for those signs of danger for when things might begin to shift. And your nervous system actually learns that, oh, connection, it feels more like danger than it does safety. And so that's a huge shift in what it should feel like in a relationship. Your partner should make you feel safe and secure. You should make your partner feel safe and secure. And if it feels scary, if it feels dangerous, if you feel like your nervous system's constantly in hyper-vigilant mode, trying to detect your partner's mood, your partner's behavior, then that may be a sign that you are in a trauma bond. Let's talk about some specific symptoms of a trauma bond relationship. One of them is that you might actually minimize your partner's harmful behavior. What does this mean? Well, it means that they do something, but you often find yourself rationalizing. Well, they were just in a bad mood. Well, I just did this, and so it kind of provoked them. Well, it was kind of my fault because I know their trigger and I triggered them, or you know what, they're just really stressed at work. If you find yourself constantly rationalizing or minimizing your partner's harmful behaviors, that might be a sign you're in a trauma bond. Another one is if you hold the potential of the relationship more tightly than the reality of the relationship, that could be another symptom. What do I mean by that? In other words, you constantly think, man, if we could just get to this place, things would be fine. My partner would love me the way I really need to be loved if they could just do this one thing, or if we could just get to this place together. As opposed to looking at, you know what, there has been a pattern of harmful behavior for years now, and this is the reality that I live in. This is 99% of my behavior or my partner's behavior in this relationship. And this is the reality of it, not some hoped for potential future. So that might be a sign, the second sign, that you could be in a trauma bond relationship. Another one of those signs is that you might feel addicted to the person. Now, I mentioned this a few minutes ago at the outset because that's oftentimes what your nervous system has adapted to. It's adapted to these high highs and it's adapted to these low lows, and it almost feels like an addiction. It almost feels like a craving. Maybe sometimes there's a part of you that feels like, if something bad's going to happen, I just want to get it over with. And so maybe you poke at your partner, maybe you prod them, maybe you get that harmful behavior over with because then your nervous system can really relax and it can feel the high that you're on after the harmful behavior happens. And so it almost becomes like an addiction. Let's get to the good part because I need that dopamine rush. I want that dopamine flooding through my system because that moment feels incredible. So let's get past this bad moment so we can get to the good one, and I can almost feel that addictive quality about it. A fourth sign that you might be in a trauma bond relationship is that you have a cycle of rupture and repair, but never with the repair. So you constantly have ruptures in the relationship, but there's never any repair of accountability where your partner can come back, own what they did, take responsibility for it, communicate sincerely that they're sorry for that, and that you begin to see the behavior change. If you're in a relationship that when your partner gets mad, they just see red, and they sort of go for the jugular. They say the most awful, horrible things about you that you can imagine. That is harmful behavior. And if your partner is not able to take accountability for that, to be able to take steps to begin to correct that so that they can express themselves when they're not seeing red, when they don't just sort of black out and then it's just scorched earth approach to arguing, if you can't see some behavior change towards that, then that could certainly be a sign that you continue to be in a trauma bond relationship. And finally, the fifth sign is that, or symptom rather, is that if you find it almost impossible to think about leaving, to think about setting a firm boundary for yourself that your partner doesn't blow through the next day, then that might be a symptom that you're in a trauma bond relationship. If leaving feels scary or dangerous, your relationship should never feel that way. All right, so what can we do to begin to sort of lessen the trauma bond? One of the first things I would do is see if you can't collaborate with your partner around how to lessen the intensity of your communications with them. If they're not willing to do that, then that is important information about where you are in your relationship. If you come to them and say in a very soft, open way, look, sometimes we communicate and things get really intense and it scares me and I don't like it. Can we work together on lowering the temperature in our conversations? If they're willing to have that conversation with you, if they're willing to collaborate and commit, That's great. You guys can figure out 100 different ways to actually lower the temperature. And give me a shout out down below, and I'll give you some additional ideas that you can do. So write, how to lower the temperature in a relationship down below of this video, and I'll respond with some ideas to that for sure. But if you can have a partner that's willing to collaborate with you, then that's a good first step. I think the second step that's most important is your partner isn't willing to recognize that things get out of control, recognize their harmful behavior, then you need to be able to have a community that understands what it's like for you in this relationship. Remember, silence only grows, harmful behavior only grows in silence. Let me say that again. Harmful behavior only grows in silence. So you need to have some people that understand what it is like for you in this relationship so that you are not alone. Because it will only get worse. That pattern will never be broken until you decide it's time to make a change. And to do that, if it's truly a trauma bond and truly it feels like an addiction in some ways, your nervous system has adapted and adjusted to this person, these high highs, these low lows, then you're going to need help. You're going to need a support network to help you be able to really set boundaries. Hey, thank you for watching. My name is Tom Philp, and I'm here to remind you to stay grounded, clear, and connected.